Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting installment of the FM Academy webinar series. Today's session is on keeping it clean, using the database design report to assist in cleaning your database, presented by IT Solutions' own Jerry Salem. FileMaker Academy is a consortium of FileMaker development companies in the United States. All FM Academy members are platinum level members of the Business Alliance, and our purpose is to further educate FileMaker users and developers to encourage best practices and foster further adoption of the software. The organization has earned recognition as a 2013 award finalist in the Alliance Management by the Institute for Excellence in Sales and Business Development. The FileMaker or FM Academy it can be accessed at FileMakerAcademy.com. Members include 360works in Atlanta, DB Services in Indianapolis, IT Solutions Consulting in Philadelphia, New York, Anvil DataWorks in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Skeleton Key in St. Louis, and Keologic in Connecticut and Boston, Massachusetts. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jerry. Go ahead, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you to all you people for coming to our seminar today. I hope you enjoy our new studios here in IT Solutions Tower. This is the first seminar we're giving in our new studio. The Database Design Report. First, I'd like to go back in history for a little bit. Do you remember building your very first FileMaker database? Probably looked a little bit like this, although mine and probably yours looked a little bit more like that. The first time you use FileMaker, everything seems intuitive. You can find where everything is, and the platform starts to work just the way you work. You can find how to do practically whatever you want to do, just using the menus and reading the help system. Eventually, you find out there's actually a manual. You buy the manual, maybe you read the manual, and you'll start working on larger systems. At first, you can keep everything in your head. For most of us, this quickly turns into a monster. You can't keep everything in your head. You don't know what fields are being used, what fields aren't being used. And all of a sudden you realize, boy, it's nice that I have a FileMaker manual. I wish I had a manual that actually took care of my great solution. And that's what the DDR really is for us, the Database Design Report. It's a built-in documentation system that's right under your nose. And you can use it to do all sorts of things. You can find stuff. For instance, is this field being used? Is that layout accessible by my regular users? Or do I really need that field? Maybe I have 6 fields that are all doing the same thing. It can also help you take a step back and look at how you're building your database, and help you identify better ways to do things. And finally, it's also a great way to share information with others. How many times have we worked with a SQL database programmer and they say, can you just give me a data dictionary? Tell me what fields there are. Using the DDR is a great way to give a data dictionary to another developer. And it's something that you can read using any kind of tool. You don't need anything special to look at it. So the Database Design Report, as I said, is commonly referred to as the DDR. It's built right into FileMaker Pro Advanced. This is one of the main reasons you bought FileMaker Pro Advanced as opposed to just buying FileMaker. The DDR is built right in and will document your entire solution. It will show you how objects are used and what the relationship is between certain objects. And by objects, I mean just about anything. Fields, layouts, tables, custom functions, and menu items. Plus, the data that you get out of a database design report is human readable. I put it in quotes because you wouldn't read it like a book, but it's more like a reference manual. And you can be trained to use this tool that will help your programming and help you to become a better database designer, and also help you to service your clients better. Every database gets more complicated over time. This happens for a number of different reasons. As users start using your database, they're going to realize that they need to track more stuff. This is just a natural outgrowth. You might have built an invoice generator. Eventually, someone is going to realize in the company that they also need to track the customers and the inventory and vendor names. So your database will just naturally get larger. In addition, as the number of users grow, the logic in your system needs to become more sophisticated. If there's just one or two people using your system, you might not be totally concerned about error trapping. But eventually, like this hypothetical invoice system I'm talking about, you might want to alert someone when inventory falls below a certain level for an item. You might even want to prevent someone from placing an order for things that you actually don't have in stock. Your database will eventually need to get smart enough to suggest alternatives for that particular item that's out of stock. You might have a school database, that will only allow you to register so many students in a particular class unless you have particular permissions to override it. So you can see there's lots of room for a database to get more sophisticated, and that sophistication comes at a price of programming. A lot of times, especially as we develop and grow as programmers, a lack of consistent style will make your database appear more complicated. You might have a repetitive task, maybe creating a related record that you do 2 or 3 different ways, and that will make things more complicated. If you always make a related record in a particular method, then your database will stay simpler. Also, it's very natural for parts of a database to become dormant. Maybe there's a series of buttons that no one remembers how they work anymore, or there's a bug no one told you about, so no one uses these things. Business rules change all the time. So a job tracking system, I know I built a job tracking system with a very sophisticated messaging system. Over time, the jobs changed at this workplace, and they didn't need this complicated messaging system. So we were able to call that part of the database, call those scripts and those layouts right out of the database. Platform changes. Now, one reason databases are complex is the platform, FileMaker, might change the way it does things, which can make things easier for you. All I need to do is say tab controls, and then you'll go, oh yeah. And experimentation. Just face it, people like to experiment in a live system. So in almost every database I've ever seen, there's going to be layouts that aren't used for reports that were half-baked, scripts that were just experiments. Can I do this? Or do I have to do it this way? And those things build up over time. And the more objects you have in your database, the more complicated it gets, the more moving parts there are. So eventually, all these things start to add up, and your database might end up looking a little bit like this. There's stuff all over the place. You don't know what fields are connected to what layouts, what buttons are used on what scripts. Using the DDR, you'll be able to tidy this up, put things away in places where you can find them easier, and your database will eventually, hopefully, look a little bit like this. There's other benefits other than just making it look nicer. It will make things easier to find, and if things are easier to find, that means you can get things done in a faster manner, and that makes everybody happy. Opening a database that has extra calculation fields, extra relationships, extra layouts, all of these things put a lot of weight on FileMaker Server to make it harder for the database to open. In addition, when you're using the database, the more things that the database engine needs to keep track of, the harder it is to, pardon me, the longer it takes to close the Manage Database dialog box. And that could be a problem, especially when you're working on a live system. Also, by using the DDR on a regular basis, you'll help to identify outdated workarounds that you might have still in your system that you didn't realize were there. Maybe you still have 5 or 6 layouts that are imitating a tab control interface, and you just never got, maybe you forgot that those layouts are there. You can consolidate that into one layout and just use a tab control. Plus, by taking a look and examining your database, you'll be able to improve your own programming style and become more consistent and more concise as a FileMaker developer. These are all great reasons to be using your DDR. Well, in today's talk, we're going to do a couple of things. First thing we're going to do is to create a DDR. I'll show you some of the basics on how to use it, how to navigate around in the system. Then we're going to look at some specific examples, how to find unused objects like unused fields and unused relationships. Also, we'll look at finding objects that are redundant, and we have a couple of other things that we'll do too. But these are the goals, the immediate goals for what we're going to do. So just to review, at this point, we have a built-in documentation tool. It's just staring us in the face. You've had it all along. What it helps us to do is to visualize the pieces of the database. We'll get a bird's eye view of how our particular database is put together and the structure of the database, not necessarily the data. The DDR works like an index. It will be a fast way to help you find things in your database without hunting around and getting lost through the forest. Enough of that. Let's move on and let's get on with the demo. You guys will probably remember this this solution if you've been regular listeners to our podcast, our webinar series. This is a database that I built for a company that creates salad dressing. It's a fairly full-featured database. This runs a company of about 200 people. They have at least 2 locations, maybe 3 locations. And it has a very iOS 7 kind of look to it, a lot of flattened buttons. But we're going to use this as our starting point for looking at the DDR. You'll remember the charts that we built in the database the last time. So to build the DDR, first thing we do, first you have to check that you're in FileMaker Advanced. We are. And there's a menu right here called Tools. And this is not present in regular FileMaker Pro. It's just in Advanced. And we're going to select Data Design Report. There's a couple of different options that you can choose when creating a DDR. On the top left, there are the available files. If you want, you don't have to run the DDR over your entire database. This might help you if you have a particular large system, or if you're creating a data dictionary like I talked about earlier. You might not need to do the entire system. We're going to leave it on. We're going to run the DDR on our main company file, and there is a data separation component to this solution. So there are 2 different files that go along with the database. In addition to excluding individual entire files, you can exclude individual tables from inside of a file. And there are things that you can include or not include. And this is going to give us a little bit of a taste on the type of information we can find in a DDR. We can include information about the accounts, the custom menus, file access, relationship scripts. Okay. We're going to leave everything checked. Another reminder, you need to have full access privileges to run the DDR. So I've logged in with full access privileges. We're going to leave everything checked off. And there are two more things we need to check. You can save the report in two different ways, in HTML or in XML. We're going to save it in HTML so we can view it in the browser. You would want to save the report in XML if you're going to be using it as in a third-party tool, and we'll talk about that a little later. There's also some other reasons why you might want to save your DDR in XML format. So we're going to save it in XML format, and we're going to automatically open the file once we're done. So now I'm ready to engage. We'll hit create, and it's going to say, where do you want to create it? Well, the first thing I'd like to remind you is when you create a DDR, it makes a couple of files and a couple of folders. So a best practice would be to create a folder specifically for an entire DDR run. So I'm going to go to the desktop right now. We'll click New Folder, and I'm going to call this FM Academy. And my convention is to put the date after the name of the solution. This way you know when it was run. So 08/20/30, because today's the 20th. I'll hit create. So it's going to save the DDR in this folder, which is on my desktop, and just leave the name of the default file as summary. Okay, I'm going to pull a Julia Childs on you. I'm not going to actually create the DDR because I already have one made. So I'm going to put that in the oven. I'm going to go to the other oven, and we'll pull out our complete DDR right here. Depending on the horsepower of the particular computer that you're using and the size of the DDR, it might take longer or shorter to create your report. This computer is a fairly new computer, and it took about 2 minutes to run this, to create this DDR. I didn't feel like vamping for 2 minutes while we just watched it. That's why I didn't bother. You can see when you open the DDR, the file that it's opening, if we just look at the URL right here, this is my folder, and it's opening summary.html. In this solution, we have two files, company A and the data file. And already, right at the front page, it gives us some good information about what's going on in the data, in the solution. Company A has 34 tables, and data has 13 tables. You can see that most of the relationships, there's 10 times more relationships in Company A, there's 300. And of course, the data file doesn't have quite as many. There's 160 layouts, 148 value lists, and blah, blah, blah. All of these are hyperlinks, so you can go directly to one section. But we're going to just select the company name, the file name, to drill into the entire DDR. Click that, and it's going to take us to the next level, I hope. There we go. So this is the name of the solution right up here, and we have a navigation panel on the left. Back to overview will take us back to that main page that we were just on. At the very top, it gives us summary information about our file. So the overview information right here, this is essentially what was going across that first row. The number of tables, the number of relationships, number of layouts, scripts, etc. And it tells us information here about the on first window open script trigger and on last window open script trigger. Notice this is a hyperlink. We can click on this, and it will take us down to the script section and take us to the actual script. So the script name was on close, and this is the script steps written right here. And let's go back to the overview file. So you can use all these links to navigate throughout the DDR. But let's just take a bird's eye view of what we can see. After this header information, there's a list of all the different tables that are in your solution. Next to the name of the table, it tells you how many fields and how many records are in that table. So here we have a lab test table, has 16 fields, there's 74 records. And on the right-hand side, it tells you all the different table occurrences that are on the relationship graph that use this table. Now, this is really nothing new or spectacular. Up to now, this is all information that you can see just from opening up your solution. So all the tables are listed, number of fields, and the relationships. There's a couple of ESS tables that are in this solution that are no longer accessible. So they would be listed here, and it would tell me about the fields, and they would show up right here. Now we get to some more interesting stuff. After the table section, we have the field section. And if we look on the left-hand side, tables, fields. So right now, we're looking at the users table. It says table name, users. And in users, there are 44 fields. The first field here is my primary key, which I've named using our FileMaker convention, _KP user ID. There's our options, that it's a serial number, and the next serial number is that right there. Now here's where it starts to get interesting. It tells me what layouts does this field actually live on. So there's a layout called Setup Users, and this field is on that layout. This field is also used in two different relationships in the database, and it's also used in a number of value lists. So there are no scripts that use the primary key for the user ID. There's a reason for that for this particular database. But you can see in the value lists, there's a number of value lists for different kinds of users. And there's a section here for every single table. I'll scroll down a little bit. These are all the different fields. And you can see that a lot of these fields aren't being used. Okay, let's get to the interface table. There's an interface table. It's got 37 fields. Some are used on a lot of layouts and a lot of scripts. This one, a gtext, this is used for data input in a lot of different places. So on these layouts, now this section goes on for quite a while because there's 30 tables and there are a fair number of fields throughout this database. After the field section, it starts with the relationships. So here we have each one of the base tables listed out and where the base table lives, whether in company A or in an external data source. In our case, that would be the data file. And what relationships it's used in, what scripts, and in what field definitions, and what layouts. So I hope you're getting an idea of all the different things that you can see in the DDR. We can go to layouts. Let's go a little further down. And it lists all the layouts in a hierarchy, just like your folders. And if you click, and after the section where it lists all the layouts, it gives you detailed information about each layout. So the first layout, actually the second layout here, is called Home. It's one of the home layouts. And it tells you, you can see the number of fields that are on the layout, the number of merge fields, the number of buttons. There's 28 buttons on that layout. There's 8 charts, and there's 2 graphic objects. And what scripts call that layouts, and any script triggers that are associated with it. After the layouts is a scripts section. The scripts are also listed the same way. And we talked a little bit about the scripts already. It tells you whether the script is visible in the scripts menu. any layouts that are used in the script and any scripts that call that particular script as a subscript. You can also see the extended privileges. This is neat. You can see all the custom functions that you have in your database, and if any are used in field definitions or in scripts, they show up right here. So there's a number of custom functions that I imported early on into the system that weren't being used. So I could probably get rid of those without any consequences. There's Ultralog by Ray Colligan, and you can see that that's being used in a number of different places. And there's an error codes one, which was imported by someone. It's only being used twice. It's probably not being used to its full potential. And it goes on and on like that. So let's talk a little bit about how you would use the script in a real-life situation to find out if there are scripts that are being used. So as we know in FileMaker, scripts are typically called from buttons. So let me show you an example first. I'm going to use my menu command to say find, and I'm going to find a particular script. So we're going to go to settings. Oh, I think I spelled it wrong. Maybe there's no space. Poof, there we go. So this piece of text, go to settings, is being used more than 100 times in my DDR. I'm going to click on the script right here. There. So this tells me it's in the utility folder. The name of the script is go to settings, and it's being used on a number of different layouts. All of these layouts are calling that script. And this script is used as a navigation script to take the user to all sorts of different layouts based on who they are. And if we try a different tact, I'm going to select formula. Here's another script which is being used on layouts. It's also being called, and it's used for going to a particular formula for a salad dressing. They keep track of the different formulas. And you can either call that script as a button, or it's being used in these scripts. So here's one for duplicate a formula. After it duplicates, it uses the same script to find that duplicated formula. Or if it's making a new formula, it uses that script to navigate you to that formula. So if you're making a modification to a script in a complicated database, this will help you to find out where else that script is being used, and it will help you to avoid any problems with having a script do something in the wrong context, because you can actually see where this script is being called. And you can do the same thing with fields. The fields. And we can look for the full name field. On the users table, there's a field called full name. And we can see that that is on a lot of the home screens, and it's a calculated field. It's, as you expect, it's the full name, it's the first name plus the last name. I usually will put something like that on a home screen because people like this. It's nice to see how you're being logged in. It's also being used in this script right here. So I can click on this and it will navigate me to that field, to that script, and we can see, let's see, if you double-click on the script name, and then I can move forward, I can see that the full name is used in an email that's being sent off of this script. So I'm using it. You can use the DDR also to find fields that aren't being used anymore. So for example, I go back to our main interface table. As we're scrolling down, there is a field called G1. G1. Now you can see that this field isn't on any layouts, it's not being used in any scripts, and it's also not being used in any relationships. This is a good candidate for removal from the database. This is probably left over from the days when you needed to have a constant one field to make relationships from one table to another. This is something that you don't really need anymore. So something that is now dormant. So why is it important to know if a field is being used? Does anybody know? Raise your hands. I can't see you guys. Well, one example is to check for all instances of the field to make sure they're not modifiable. Maybe you could have an older database where at one point all the data was modifiable on all the layouts, but as you have more users, you might want to only allow people on certain layouts to modify data. So using the DDR is a great way to find out where a field is in the database. Or a field might have sensitive information. There might be a social security number, which now is a little bit more sensitive than it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So you need to find where the social security number field is available in your particular solution. So this is a way that you can do that. What about a particular layout? Maybe you have layouts that aren't being used. We go to the layout section and customers. How many of you have databases like this? When you're looking in the database, at the bottom of the list of all your layouts, there's a bunch of layouts that are this copy, that copy, copy 1, copy 2. Well, I did that in this database. Right here at the very end of the list of layouts, there's a layout called Customer Detail Copy. So chances are that was created by someone who wanted to just try something out and experiment. So I click on the layout, and here's the layout detail. And I can see that the layout is not visible in the layout drop-down list. I forget what that yes means. But there's a number of fields that are on the layout. This is what table that's associated with it. And we can see that there are no scripts that navigate me to the layout, and there are no other scripts that that call this layout. Well, let's make sure we got those columns right. Sometimes you have to scroll up and down. Eventually, you get to remember which what the columns are. So used in scripts. Okay, so there are no scripts, and there are no script triggers associated with this particular layout. Let's go back down. So this is a layout that's probably not being used in your database. So you would probably want to get rid of it because it's just making things harder to find elsewhere in your database. And it's a good practice every once in a while to just go through your layouts, and all your layouts should be used for something or another. This also works for scripts. So I'm sure you've all seen these scripts. Like here's new script right here. Is this thing being used? I can go here. There's nothing in the script, and it's just an empty script shell. sort rail car. Here's another one. So this is a sorting script, and it sorts a field name, and there's two of them. I made a couple of these. Now this copy one, there's a copy and a regular one. This one actually is being used because it's being used on this script. So I would probably want to rename this to a better name instead of using the word copy. In general, your DDR is browser agnostic. You can use it on a Mac, on a PC, obviously, and it doesn't really matter if you're using Safari or Explorer or any other browser. But one neat trick that I learned I'd like to pass on to you, I just heard this recently from my friend Lee Strong on the FileMaker Success Tips podcast, is using Google Chrome as your browser for running your DDR. I'm going to open up our browser and open up our DDR. Yeah. And let's open this. Chrome has one neat feature when we're looking for objects in our DDR. Like, okay, like that one's right there already. I'll hit the Enter key. So it finds it. On the right-hand side, well, it tells me every place where this this script is being used. Let me scroll over. Can I scroll over? How do I scroll to the right? I don't use Chrome all that much. But anyway, you can see that, there it is. Down here, you can click on it, and it will take, oops, I can pull down to right around there. So right now, my cursor is right up here at the top, and I go down to the next instance. I'm all the way down here. I'm in script steps. So here we see there's a button on this particular layout that's calling this script. So after a while, you get to sort of know your DDR. Up here are all the fields. Can you see my mouse? Up here are all the field definitions. Down here are layouts, or the layout information. So I can see that this particular script is used in a couple of field definitions, and it's available on some layouts. And let's move on down to the next section. Okay, now I'm down here for some other layouts. And then down here are my actual script definitions. So it gives you an idea, and you'll get to know your particular solutions on what's located in different areas. So you'll eventually get to know your database. Get to know your database, where if you search for a script and you don't see anything in this area, you know that that script is not being used on any layouts. You'll see some hits up here, obviously, and you'll see some hits down here for the script definition. So that's a really great tip. I like that one. Another one, when you're doing periodic maintenance on your database or cleaning, is to look for particular strings. So if there's a missing object, the DDR is going to insert unknown like that in place. So if I search for the word unknown, so here I can see that these script steps are commented out that I'm looking at. So go to related record from a missing table using the current layout. But here's something that's missing. And you might always have things like this in your database, but you should know this is a good idea to check to make sure that none of these are actually causing problems. So here's one where I'm calling a script, but I don't know the script. And so this would, in a real-life situation, definitely be a problem if you're trying to reference an unknown script. This could be caused by a database that's no longer open, or a script trying to call a script that's been deleted. Another good flag to be looking for is greater than missing, like that. And that's used for missing fields, missing relationships, blah, blah, blah. So here you can, in this script, this is a long script, so it would be easy using just FileMaker without any outside tool to miss this. But in this go to order script, it's pretty long. And somewhere in here is a missing field. And I can see it's right here. If a missing field is empty, my comment is go to this purchase order. But it can't do that because the field is missing and the layout is, oh, look at that, go to layout, unknown layout. So this part of the script definitely isn't working, at least in this context. I think the customer that's using it, it's still working. One last sort of an intermediate technique I'd like to tell you about is when you're looking for instances of a field to see whether or not it's being used, it's a good idea to rename the field and then rerun the DDR or any object. Let's say, especially when you have fields that have the word copy. So let's search for the word copy. Okay, so here, this is a nice example. Here's a script called go to bulk production, and it's got some parameters and has the word copy. It doesn't appear to be called by any layouts or any other scripts. Before deleting this, what I would do is go find this layout, go find this script in the actual solution. So let's do that. Go to bulk. What was it called? Go to bulk with no space. There it is. And I would rename this with something obvious. Doesn't really matter, like underscore to be deleted. I would save this script, rerun the DDR, and do a search for this piece of text, to be deleted, just to double check that that script isn't being used in any other contexts. Okay. Unfortunately, not everything is obvious in a DDR. Sometimes there are objects that appear not to be used, but they actually are being used. So you have to do a little bit of detective work. I'm going to get out of Chrome. It's not my happy place, really. And let's go back into Safari. Thank you. For instance, if we want to look at a field, maximum current price. Here's a field in the database that appears not to be used. It's not on any layouts. It's not called in any scripts. And it's not used in any value lists. Before I just willy-nilly decide I'm going to delete that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a search for that field, and I'm going to see every place that it's being used. Actually, right here, I can see that it's being used 4 places in the database. This is one of them. Another one is right here in this display field, price display. It's using the current price as part of the display. And this calculation actually does, this field actually does show up on a number of different layouts. So here's an example where you wouldn't want to just delete this number field that looks like it's not being used, because in fact on closer examination you can see it's being used. There's the original. It's being used in this field definition. Let's hit the next button. It's also used in this field definition. And it's also being used, it uses some related data. So it's using that relationship. So that's the first example of making sure that a field isn't being used in another place. Let's see. New record navigator. Okay, here's another script. Which also appears that it's not being used. Let me get the whole name. New record underscore navigator. Okay, there's 11 matches, so we're going to find that this script uses that field. There's the name of the script. There's the script definition. And here, this is just a relic. It tells you what the previous script was. And this script is being used by the new railcar drill script. So this script actually is being used. In a couple different places. And it's also being used in a menu. It's being used in the new record menu. So if you navigate into this particular database, we're using custom menus throughout the system, and this new record script is being used in this menu item. So you should, whenever you're going through the DDR, you should completely go do a find over the entire DDR. There. Looking for instances of your particular object, because they could be hiding in a lot of different places. Layouts can also hide. There are some interesting places that layouts can hide. In a go-to layout, if you use a button that simply goes to a layout without a script, then that doesn't always show up in the DDR. Let's look at this layout. Customer, detail, iPad. You guys probably all have something, a layout that's called something like that in your database. This layout is, or this piece of text, pardon me, is in our DDR 59 times. And this is the layout definition. So the layout has these fields on it. It's not being used by any scripts to navigate to the layout. Now, right now, we're looking at this particular layout. So on the left-hand side in our navigation pane, you'll see that we're roughly here in the layouts section. I'm going to navigate down. Oh, holy cow. So we can see on this layout, the customer list iPad layout, there's a button on that layout, which is a single script step, and that is go to layout. So this is a great way for layouts to hide. If you're calling a button that does just a single script step, it's not necessarily going to show up as being used in the DDR. I'll show you what I mean by that. We want to go to the customer list iPad. So let's bring up our layout manager. Oh, it's right there. Open. And if we view buttons, okay, this is a button, and it's go to layout, and it's going to layout by name at least, and there's customer detail iPad. A rule of thumb I always tell my students is when you're using a button, and if you're not using perform script, if you're using anything but perform script, you want to think, at least pause, because eventually this will be a problem. Anything other than perform script will you'll have to revisit and fix later. Script steps are like potato chips. You almost never want to simply do one thing. You'll probably want to go to a layout, manage the window, maybe resize it, rename it, but it's almost never simply go to a layout. So you always want to hesitate just for a moment if you're going to do something like that. In this case, it makes sense because it's an iPad layout. So all you really need to do is do one script step. But in general, it's a good idea to simply pause when you do something like that. Now, another great way that you can stumble is to use a script step other than go to layout by name, using something like go to layout name by calculation, or go to layout number by calculation. This is another place where you can trip yourself up at some point. Where's the name of that? I forgot to underline that. Okay. Oops. So when you do something like that, go to layout by name, then the name of the layout is just going to appear in your database as a calculated text. It's not something that the DDR can actually track. So whenever you're referencing something by text, by a piece of text, then the DDR can't really track it effectively. If we go to scripts, go to test layout. Here's a great example of that. Yeah, actually, you can see it easier in FileMaker. Go to test layout. Here, we have a simple one-line script, and it's go to layout, but instead of going explicitly to one layout, it's go to layout name by calculation. So let's look at what the calculation is. It's a case statement. If the current privilege set is full access, it's going to take us to the layout whose name is home. Otherwise, it will take you to home copy. So this type of logic sometimes can be great, but you have to be aware of the problems that this can cause. If you rename either of these two layouts, this script step will no longer work. In addition, the fact that you're using this layout and this layout is harder to find in the DDR because as far as FileMaker is concerned, this is just a piece of text. It doesn't really know that that's a particular layout that you're using. In the same way, I don't want to save that. Here's another script step which unless you have a really good reason to do it, I would avoid. This is go to layout number by calculation. So in this one, I put the same type of logic. If I'm the full access person, go to layout number 3. And if I'm not full access, go to layout number 4. And this refers to the layout number when you're looking at the list of layouts. This guy, layout 1, 2, 3. So if you are picking up a database that either you haven't seen for a long time, or maybe you're picking it up from another developer, you want to, and the first thing you might do is rearrange all the layouts so they're in a logical order for you. If the previous developer, or you as the previous developer, was using this kind of logic, either go to layout by name or go to layout by number, renaming and rearranging your layouts is going to hurt. I've done that before, and I start rearranging things, and then all of a sudden people start calling that all the navigation is broken. But all is not lost. You can actually find out this information. You can't do it in a regular DDR, because you'll see in the regular DDR it says go to layout, and it tells you home or copy. But there's no obvious way to search for going to layout by layout name, because it always will just say go to layout. Remember at the beginning of the presentation I talked about exporting your data using either HTML or XML. If you export your data as XML, then you can find out that information. So I took the liberty of exporting this data using XML. I did that before we started. Here it is, analysis for the 19th XML. And when you open that, you get something that looks a little similar. You get a summary document, then you get one document for your data and for the company file. If you open up the company file using any old text editor, like Text Wrangler, you can do a find for go to layout name by calc. And we can find all. Did I spell that right? Layout name, okay, not the go-to. I think there's a space there. These are all in the show notes. Ah, here we go. So there's a fair number of go to layout name. Oh. By calc. Yeah, that's better. So here, and this you need to sort of search a little bit. I won't go through the details, but you can, if you understand XML at all, you can see this is a script step. And here's the script step, go to layout, and it's going to layout name by calculation. And then here's the calculation. And you can scroll up in here, and eventually you'll see what the name of the script is. I think there might be tools to do this a little easier, but this is sort of what I do, because this is what I like to do. Okay. Anyway, let's get back. So you can search the XML for that kind of hidden thing. Really, the XML is only good unless you're going to import it into another tool. It's really useful for go to layout by name calculation or by number calculation. Okay, let's go back to the presentation so we can start wrapping up. There. So we already talked about some of the gotchas. set field, and here's just a couple of other ones. There's set field by name. So that's a script step where you can explicitly reference a field by name in a piece of text. So that's another instance where you have to search the DDR for the name of the field. Also execute SQL. We just talked about go to layout by name. Another important thing to keep in mind is server-side scripts. When you write a server-side script, you cannot rename the script. And you also don't know that it's being called by a server. So there's another script that could appear for all intents and purposes as not being used. So you should make sure. So here's an example. This script actually, we put, typically at IT Solutions, we'll put the name server right in the script name. So here we have, this script name is called server nightly batch operations. Another place to watch out for things that are referenced by name is in FileMaker URLs. This is a fairly new feature. It's in FileMaker 12. In this particular example, I create an email that goes to a supervisor in a particular database when a work order needs to get expedited. The supervisor gets an email, and they can click on a link, a link that opens up FileMaker and runs a particular script. So this script is, you don't know inside FileMaker that a script can be called from a URL. So that's a good gotcha. So you want to make sure you understand how people are using your database, because you can see right in this link, we're calling a script exactly by name using just a piece of text. And also, you should be aware if your database is being used by other people in a PHP or any type of OBDC type of integration, because you also don't know if a field or if a layout or a relationship is being used by some outside party. So before you delete something, you should check with all the different stakeholders. So for unused layouts, another thing you should keep track of before you delete a layout. I've seen plenty of systems that have advanced users that know that in order to do their particular task, they have to go into layout mode, go to a hidden layout, and do something. So it's a good idea to always notify the stakeholders that you're going to be removing things and cleaning things up. So again, I can't stress looking for hidden objects. Watch out for scripts and fields. Watch out for things that are used like in go to related record buttons, like buttons that have single steps, and script triggers, and scripts that are called in from other files is also something that you should watch out for. And we're going to skip that for time. This will be in the show notes. You'll be able to find out how to look for duplicate relationships. I have to make sure I mention some of the other great tools that are around for looking at your DDR. Most of these are tools to help you interpret and look at the DDR. They start with an XML document. Base Elements, Inspector Pro, and are really good ones. They import an XML document, and they will display it for you. FMDiff doesn't really use a DDR, but it's a great tool. I always like to mention it. You take a backup of your FileMaker file and then your current file, and it tells you what's different about the two of them. And the final two, X-Ray Specs and Developer's Assistant, are just developers' tools which give you access to something like a DDR in real time. So you can look at a script and you can search your database to find out where the script is being used. Or it will tell you where objects are used on particular layouts. These are all really great tools that you should be at least aware of if not using. So in summary, it's very easy to run a DDR. It's a good idea to run them on a regular basis, maybe every quarter, to go through your database and make sure that everything is up to snuff. When you run the DDR, you use the find command to look for all the instances of an object that, that interests you. Maybe it's something that you want to get rid of. Maybe it's a field that you want to change, a calculation field that you need to change the definition of. You want to make sure that that field isn't being used in a funny context, or if someone is going to see data that's presented in that field that maybe shouldn't be seeing that data. Be aware that you can also run an XML analysis, and then you can get information out of that you can't see in the regular HTML version of the DDR. And doing all of these things will keep your database neat and clean. And I have to end with something just a little silly. Every time I say keep your database clean, if you're of a particular vintage, you'll probably recognize this. This always keeps running through my head as I was doing this. So I'll let this play for a moment while you think about some questions, and Mark will field some questions. Okay, that didn't work, so we'll just move on to the questions.
That was a funny. It was the song "Shaving Cream." In case you didn't know.
Okay. All right. So we're going to field. We do have a few questions queued up. So we'll try to field them. Some of them I think were answered as part of the presentation, but we'll go through. Is it possible to find unused buttons on the DDR? A button, a button that calls a script. How can I know if there are scripts that no buttons call?
Okay. Yeah. Actually, you bring up a really interesting point, which this does not address. This doesn't address whether or not a button or a script is being used. So, for example, using the DDR, I cannot know how often people actually click on that particular button. So I don't know if you're clicking on a button. All I do know is whether or not something is available. So to answer specifically your question, if you want to know if a script is being called, you want to look in the beginning section of a script, of the script definition in the DDR. So let me go to the scripts. So if we just pick one at random, this is on layout load, conference enter on layout load. That's not a great one.
Yeah, it's going to get called.
Yeah. Okay, complete something.
Yeah.
So this particular script is on these three layouts. So it's called complete railcar drill. This client gets raw material on a rail car, on like a train. That's just to give you context what this is. So this script, the complete railcar drill, is on this layout called railcar drill. So if I click on railcar drill, this is the definition, if you will, of the layout. On this layout, there are 400 fields. It's a very complicated layout. There's 81 buttons. If I click on this link right here, 81 buttons, it will tell me, it will list all the buttons. So here's a button, complete is what we were looking for. Tells you the, open one, the name of the button, what layout it's on, and what script is being called by that particular button. So using this, you can find exactly what button is calling it. Actually, maybe I would use the find. Basically, your answer for everything is use the find command. Complete rail car drill. Okay, it's used 17 times. So 17 times is sort of a small number. This number reflects how many fields are being used by that script. Okay, here we go. So it not only what layout, what buttons are calling that script, but it's also a reflection of how many fields are in that script. So here we go. Here's the button on this layout that we were talking about, and the name of the button is confirm departure, and it calls that script. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And then a follow-up to that was, is it possible to find unused scripts and relationships on the DDR? But I think you covered that.
Yeah.
Someone made a comment that it is often useful to search for the / and asterisk together because FileMaker comments out during conversion. I guess conversion from FileMaker 6 to FileMaker 7 and beyond will comment stuff out. So it's sometimes helpful to look for the
like I did
star.
Right here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's true. I might want to do that on an initial conversion. You'll get if you're a good programmer and you comment things a lot, you'll get a zillion of hits.
Good point. Good point.
But that is a good idea.
There's a question. When you first started, you passed over a section of shadow items. What is the implication of something being a shadow?
Oh, that's an ESS table. So if you're using external data sources, like this database had a component that lived on a SQL in a SQL database, and those tables are referred to in FileMaker as shadow tables.
Okay.
So this data source would be my SQL database that sits on some other server, which I don't physically have access to it here.
The question came in, what are there tools, and I think you mentioned one, that show the difference between two DDRs before and after, and FMDiff does not analyze a DDR, but rather a database.
Right.
And the comment also,
Inspector Pro
does have
it does do that. I didn't have time to run it before the presentation, but you can import two DDRs in Inspector Pro, and it will show you a difference.
Oh, okay. Well, that answers that question. Yeah, I was going to say the follow-up question was FMDiff does not appear to work in FileMaker 12 or on FileMaker 12 databases. So I don't know. I can't confirm or deny that.
I used it with
12.
But
if it doesn't, I imagine that they're on their way with with the solution to that.
Check that you're using the most current version. Okay. We'll put that in the show notes, whatever the answer is.
Gotcha. Okay. And then there's a question just asking if the third-party products have features, citing them as being, I guess, certainly more expensive than just running the DDR if you already have FileMaker Advances. Just asking the relative value of some of those third-party products. I think I mean, no question that it is easier to work inside the friendly FileMaker database interface on your DDR than it is to work in either an HTML file or text file. I think, there's no question that there's some real value to being able to use native FileMaker features like the find on a DDR. So,
and the latest version of Inspector has some very nice eye candy where they will present an HTML map, if you will, showing all the different layouts of your database with connections from one layout to another, so you get a visual picture of what layouts are important and what layouts are not as important in your database.
Very nice. So and you covered in one of your slides all of the most of the third-party products out there that can do this. So that's I think it's worth looking at those and seeing if one of them fits your needs.
Yeah, absolutely. The neat thing about X-ray specs and also Developer's Assistant is those work in line with you in real time as you're developing your solution. So, for instance, I think it's Developer Assistant. The thing that does, which is really its standout feature, and I hope I got the right two, is you can do a find on your in the managed database on the relationship graph, and you can type in a name of a table or a name of a TO, and it highlights it for you.
That's pretty slick.
Yeah, and I think it's X-ray specs, which works with your ScriptMaker environment, where you can do a find over your entire database to say, where is this script being used? And it will find all the instances, and that works inside FileMaker.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we also have an announcement for the next webinar. That is Keologic.
Da-da-da. Hold on.
Oh,
there it is.
all right. So John Mathewson will be presenting from Keologic on November 15th, developing user-centered apps with reusable code. So please join us again. We're going to assume that that's at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you'll definitely get an email about that. And thanks everyone for all of your questions. And thank you very much for attending. And we appreciate it very much. Have a good day.
Bye.